So here we are looking on the internet at the subject, the truth about the Temple Mount and Wailing Wall. There's so much information here. There's a video on it on YouTube, a few of them actually. Once one puts one out, everybody else hops on board and goes with it, flows with it, whether they have the evidence or not. Okay, sometimes people are clickbaits and give you false information. Okay, one party will say no, it's actually the Wailing Wall, it's traditional. The other will say no, you're lying, here's the evidence. Perhaps sometimes make stuff up, but you need to get it from a irrefutable, infallible source. So we're going to have a look at the posts, not so much the video. You can do that at another time, maybe a part 2 or part 3 of this. Okay, so we're trying to get to the truth of it. So we're looking at this one first, the truth about the Temple Mount and Wailing Wall at Zide Pub, and what they had to say about it. Okay, it says please log in to access to this content, so we'll flag that one, because there should be other free content. We don't have to do that. Okay, so Christian Observer. Looks like they're saying the same thing as Brother Nathaniel was saying on the video. Test all things, hold fast to what is good. 1 Thessalonians 5:21. Here's a picture of the Temple Mount, Dome of the Rock. Okay, and here's their statement, the article statement. The Wailing Wall and evidence for the real site of the temple in Jerusalem. July 6, 2018 by Y. Nightingale. The Wailing Wall is a Jewish holy place, is a modern invention. He's stating here it's a modern invention that was selected for Jewish worship by one of the greatest mystics of the Kabbalistic age. His name was Isaac Luria, who in his many geographical mistakes selected the Western Wall as a holy place for the Jews to assemble a mere 430 years ago. In actual fact, the Jewish people today at the Wailing Wall are not praying at a wall of their former temples. They are actually praying toward the Western Wall of Fort Antonia. The shrine on the other side of the Wailing Wall in the time of Jesus was not the temple built by Herod, but it was a Roman temple dedicated to the Roman Emperor and the gods of Rome. This is by Ernest Martin. A reader recently called her attention to the Wailing Wall, being troubled in spirit by the fact that all world leaders go there to offer prayers, and wondered what it might mean. He wrote in part, many, including world-known pastors, travel miles just to go and pray at the Wailing Wall. Apparently expected to. They've got to do that, don the yarmulke and do that before any business deals go down. It's just what I've come across in my personal research. Some even ask their members, including top politicians, to give them their prayer requests to pray for them at the Wailing Wall. World leaders also travel to Jerusalem to pray at the Wailing Wall. It is only at the Wailing Wall that prayers are answered. She believes something extraordinary, or this person believes something extraordinary, not godly, takes place at the Wailing Wall. He is right. Vaguely remembering a video on the subject, I pulled up this. Here's a transcript. It's not showing the video. If there's one rite or passage that every American politician must pass through, it's doing obeisance to the Jews at the Wailing Wall. That's what I was talking about earlier. Even Rand Paul caved to the Jews, sometimes his father would never do, and found himself sacrificing his own son to the Kotel rabbi, looking at as if he was being led away to the slaughter. You see, taking the mark of the beast in order to buy Jewish admission to sell political services is every American politician's career dependent rite of passage, supposedly. Now the Jews would have us believe that there's something sacred about the Western Wall, that it's a remnant of the Second Temple, where paper prayers of the Goyim, that's non-Jews, the Gentiles, people of other nations, are snatched by the divine presence who supposedly dwells in its crevices and stones, the Shekinah. Dead wrong. The Wailing Wall is actually the remains of a Roman fortress called Fort Antonia, built north of the actual temple where no protruding rock ever existed, but rather was built upon the Gihon Spring. This rock, upon which a dome of the rock was built adjoining the western wall, was actually the centerpiece around which Fort Antonia was built. There's nothing sacred about this rock or this wall. This is attested to by the eyewitness Jewish historian Josephus, who also wrote in his Jewish Wars that the Romans left nothing above or below ground of the Second Temple, so that one coming to Jerusalem thereafter would never believe a temple ever existed. According to Josephus, Titus, the Roman general who razed Jerusalem to the ground in 70 AD, allowed Fort Antonia to remain to house the 10th Legion, left to monitor Roman affairs in Jerusalem. And I read through personal research again that they posted guards on top of it who kept an eye on the people, because amongst them were zealots who started riots, trouble, etc. And they were there to keep the peace. Okay. If anything started up, they'd go and deal with it. According to Josephus, Titus, the Roman general who razed Jerusalem to the ground in 70 AD, allowed Fort Antonia to remain to house the 10th Legion, left to monitor Roman affairs in Jerusalem. And thus the prophecy of Christ, not one stone will be left upon another, was fulfilled. God will not be mocked. If you still don't believe me, then get the book, The Temples That Jerusalem Forgot, by Professor Dr. Ernest Martin, and you'll surely be convinced. So go find that book, download it and read it. Now, what Rand Paul should have known is that the Wailing Wall is the seat of a satanic ritual outlined by the 13th century Jewish occult system known as the Kabbalah, as expounded in the Zohar and expanded upon by the 18th century Hasidic movement. Okay, this is this person's opinion, not mine. You see, this so-called divine presence at the Wailing Wall is actually the Kabbalistic feminine emanation of their false god, the Shekinah. I know of a young woman who is out there from here, and her name is Shekinah, which I think means queen. I'm not really sure. Watch closely how the rabbis thrust their pelvises and etc. back and forth in a prescribed prayer movement called davening, in which a Jew copulates with the Shekinah in order to give birth to an erotic union with the Ein Sof, the Kabbalistic masculine emanation of their false god. Now watch this young Jewish boy who, instinctively knowing that davening is a lewd and embarrassing act, just can't bring himself to perform the thrusting of his pelvis. My friends, for Rand Paul, that's actually was in the video created and posted by the supposed wacky quacky Office Med's Brother Nathaniel. He points to that. So it could be they're just reviewing that video, taking it all from that video. My friends, for Rand Paul and for so many other saps like McCain, Bush, Obama, Clinton and Romney, to perform the rite of political passage at the Wailing Wall is nothing less than to shake hands with the devil. And if God doesn't dwell in temples made by human hands, as the Bible tells us, much less would he dwell in the Roman fortress. The hoax is on. Not only are our politicians selling their souls to the Jews at the Roman fortress, named Fort Antonia, now misnamed the Western Wall, they're participating in a lewd occult ritual where the so-called divine presence is actually Satan himself. Satan's seat is at the Wailing Wall, and our politicians brought there by the Jews are carrying him all the way back home to America. Looking further, I came upon this video. There's a disclaimer. While the producer of this video, Ken Klein, compellingly refutes the location of the Temple of Jerusalem and rightly rejects futurism, this is not an endorsement. Okay, here's a video here of these. We can leave the link. Okay, it's just exposing the supposed truth, comparing it between Brother Nathaniel's statement and these other people's statement, right, in their videos, establishing the facts as fact, the evidence as evident, and so forth. Okay. Here is a lengthy abridgment of the book mentioned by Brother Nathaniel. There you go. That's probably their source. The Temple Jerusalem, that Jerusalem forgot. About the author, because it sounded familiar. Ernest Martin was formerly a leader of the Herbert Armstrong there we go, Worldwide Church of God, but left when he realized through study of Scripture that the church teaching more seriously at odds with the Bible. He has come to his own conclusion from Scripture without much influence from Christian tradition, and thus has a unique point of view. He now teaches strongly that Jesus is God, become a man, that's hypostasis, denied by Armstrong, but has two serious errors in theology. He teaches that 1. The Holy Spirit is not a person, Matthew 28:19, 2 Corinthians 13:14, Hebrews 3:7, and 2. Every person, including Judas and Satan, will eventually be reconciled to God, Matthew 26:24, Revelation 14:9, 11, 20, and 10. The first error is much more serious than the second because it causes him not to experience the Spirit, and thus is a stranger to the New Testament. Okay, and he's got the source here, biblicaltheology.com. Still, his research about the site of the temple in Jerusalem is compelling. Biblical Theology, 2000, Dr. Ernest L. Martin, excerpts, full text and bibliography, here. Okay, there's a link here. Biblical Theology, biblicaltheology.com, research/Martin EO1.html. Abstract: neither the Dome of the Rock near the centre of the Haram Sharif in Jerusalem, nor the Al-Aqsa Mosque occupying the southern side of the Haram, nor any area within the four walls of that Haram was the real spot in Jerusalem where the holy temples of God were located. Biblical and literary accounts dogmatically place the site of all the temples over the Gihon Spring, just north of the ancient city of David, of Zion, on the southeastern ridge of Jerusalem. The western Wailing Wall of the Jews, and some information there. Okay. And they state this made the four temple walls to be 600 square feet on each side tower, like a 40-story skyscraper in Chicago. It extended upwards with its southeast section of the wall within the river bottom, its deepest part of the Kidron. Barnabas described the temple 15 years after its destruction as a tower, 16:4-8, and the Book of Enoch and the Shepherd of Hermes. Keep in mind that these are pseudepigrapha. They know when they were roughly when they were actually written, but they don't know precisely who the author is. Okay, there's conjecture, but yeah, they're saying it's that's why they're saying it's pseudepigrapha. Okay. Book of Enoch and the Shepherd of Hermes give numerous reference that the temple was indeed shaped as a tower. See the web page references. The above description is that of Josephus, an eyewitness to the temple and its actual dimensions. Let us now take these four square walls of the temple, each 600 feet in length, and transport them to centre over the Dome of the Rock, some 1,000 feet north of the Gihon Spring. The tower would indeed fit well into the enclosure known as the Haram Sharif, but its southeast corner would not be located in the bottom of the Kidron Valley. It would be up on the level area of the Haram, nor would its northeast corner be precipitous and over the Kidron Valley, as Josephus said. Indeed, if the temple stood over the Dome of the Rock, the temple platform on top of a 40-story skyscraper would have been higher than the top summit of the Mount of Olives. In no way was this the proper scenario. If, however, one will return the temple and its dimensions as Josephus gave them to the Gihon Spring site, everything fits perfectly. What this shows is the fact that the walls around the Haram Sharif are not of the former temple. They are those of Fort Antonia, which are not a square of 600 feet, but of much larger dimensions, and they are trapezium in shape. It also makes perfect sense that Titus would have wanted the 10th Legion to be housed in this remaining fortress that survived the war that formerly overshadowed the temple on its north side. What happened to the stones of the temple? All of the temple and its walls were torn down to their foundations, just as Jesus prophesied they would be. Consequently, let us not get the two different buildings, Fort Antonia and the temple, mixed up as all scholars and religious leaders have done since the time of the Crusades. It is time to get back to this truth of the Bible. All should read my book, The Temples that Jerusalem Forgot, where the historical evidence shows without doubt that the real place of the former Jewish temples was over the Gihon Spring on the southeast ridge. Okay, this is excerpts from Dr. Ernest L. Martin, his full text and bibliography at biblicaltheology.com. Again, it's in relation to his book that he wrote. Okay, that's one claim of truth, one point of view, which seems related. It's relating to the claims of Brother Nathaniel in his video about the Wailing Wall. So we are going to look at another one. Truth about the Temple Mount and Wailing Wall. I think we looked at that one, so I probably had to sign up for that. More confessions. So look at this one. We're just being selective here. We're not. We hadn't pre-looked at them, and you decided, well, we'll choose this one. We'll choose this one. But we're just going random. Okay, thoughtcompany.com. What you need to know about the Wailing Wall or Western Wall, Jew, Arabs and the Wailing Wall. Okay, by Pierre Tristram, updated January 15, 2020, so it's pretty recently updated. The Wailing Wall, also referred to as the Kotel, the Western Wall or Solomon's Wall, and whose lower sections date to about the 1st century BCE, is located in the old quarter of East Jerusalem in Israel. Built of thick, corroded limestone, it is about 60 feet, 20 meters high, and close to 160 feet, 50 meters long, though most of it's engulfed in other structures. Okay, a sacred Jewish site. The wall is believed to be devout. It's believed by devout Jews to be the western wall of the Second Temple of Jerusalem, destroyed by the Romans in 70 CE. The only surviving structure of the Herodian Temple, built during the realm of Herod Agrippa, 37 BCE to 4 CE, in the 1st century BCE. The temple's original location is in dispute, leading some Arabs to dispute the claim that the wall belongs to the temple, arguing instead that it is part of the structure of Al-Aqsa Mosque on the Temple Mount. The structure's description as the Wailing Wall derives from its Arabic identification as Al-Mabka, or place of weeping, frequently repeated by European, and particularly French, travellers to the Holy Land in the 19th century as Les Murs des Lamentations. Jewish devotions believe that the divine presence never departs from the Western Wall. Worshipping the wall. The custom of worshipping at the Western Wall began during the medieval period. In the 16th century, the wall and the narrow courtyard where people worship was located with the 14th century Moroccan quarter. The Ottoman Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent, born 1494, died 1566, set aside this section for the express purpose of the religious observances of any kind. In the 19th century, the Ottomans allowed Jewish men and women to pray together on Fridays and high holy days. They segregated themselves by gender. The men stood still or sat apart from the wall, while the women moved about and rested their foreheads against the wall. Beginning in 1911, the Jewish users began bringing chairs and screens to allow the men and women to worship in separate cloisters in the narrow passageway, but the Ottoman rulers saw it for what it probably also was, the thin edge of the wedge to ownership, and banned such behaviour. In 1929, a riot occurred when some Jews attempted to build a temporary screen. Modern struggles. The Wailing Wall is one of the great Arab-Israeli struggles. Jews and Arabs still dispute who is in control of the wall and who has access to it, and many Muslims maintain that the Wailing Wall has no relation to ancient Judaism at all. Sectarian and ideological claims aside, the Wailing Wall remains a sacred place for Jews and others who often pray, or perhaps wail, and sometimes slip prayers written on paper through the walls, welcoming fishers. In July 2009, Alon Nil launched a free service allowing people around the world to Twitter their prayers, which are then taken in printed form to the Wailing Wall. Israel's annexation of the wall. After the War of 1948 and the Arab capture of the Jewish quarter in Jerusalem, Jews were generally banned from praying at the Wailing Wall, which was at times defaced by political posters. Israel annexed Arab East Jerusalem immediately after the 1967 Six-Day War and claimed ownership of the city's religious sites. Incensed and fearing that the tunnel the Israelis began digging, I remember this, starting from the Wailing Wall and under the Temple Mount, shortly after the war was over, was designed to undermine the foundations of Al-Aqsa Mosque. They were scared that it was going to dig underneath it and it'll collapse. Islam's third holiest site after the mosque, that it was deliberate, doing it deliberately. Islam's third holiest site after the mosques in Mecca and Medina in Saudi Arabia. Palestinians and other Muslims rioted, triggering a clash with Israeli forces. There were 5 Arabs dead and hundreds wounded. In January 2016, the Israeli government approved the first space where non-Orthodox Jews of both sexes can pray side by side, and the first reformed prayer service for both men and women took place in February 2016 in a section of the wall known as Robinson's Arch. And there's sources of further reading. Okay, there. So that's the second one we're looking at. Okay, there. I don't think they're really saying. Well, there's some doubt between the Arabs and the Jews that this war is not as they claim it to be. Okay, there's a bit of history on it. So that's the second one we've looked at. So we're going to go one more. Hopefully establish the facts as a fact. As fact. Okay, the Wailing Wall, evidence for the real site. I've seen that one. Can't go Zypub because you have to sign up for that. It's a YouTube video. Okay, it's the secret of the Lost Temple, the real location of Solomon's. What about the Wailing Wall, the Western Wall during the Passover? The Wailing Wall, which is allegedly the remains of the Second Temple, is a fictional invention of man, a man named Isaac Luria in the 17th century. He created his own form of Kabbalah and proclaimed that a divine presence manifested over the Western Wall. Okay, the Olivet Discourse.